Hi guys, welcome to Threads Podcast, Life Unfiltered. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We're super excited to record again 2 Sundays in a row, 2 live streams in a row.
I know.
That's amazing. So tonight we have another interview with Amanda Waldron, right?
That's right. That's my name.
That's your name. All right, and we're super excited to have her here. We're going to talk about, race again and faith and mental health. And So anyone that's new to Threads Podcast, Ben's going to kind of explain what Threads is about, and then we'll kind of jump into it.
Yeah. So Threads Podcast, Life Unfiltered, is a place where we can get real about life and all of its intricacies, and we can be unfiltered and just be open and honest in our conversation about things that matter in life. So we try to focus on 3 main categories for our show. Those would be faith, mental health, and uncomfortable conversations. Tonight we're here with Amanda, who is a therapist in Grand Rapids. Is that correct term for what you do?
Yeah,
Perfect.
I think therapist and counselor kind of get intermingled. So
we have an argument. We need to make a T-shirt for that because Ben always called it a counselor, and I said no, it's therapist, and so we argue back and forth on that.
Yeah, we do. So I've really tried to shift my verbiage to therapist. So. But Amanda and I actually went to college together at Cornerstone University, and we were on a drama team where we each had nicknames. And on the drive over tonight, I was trying to remember what hers was. I think we figured it might be Bald and Dead.
Yeah, I think it came from a monologue that I had to do about chicken, but I'm not 100% sure.
Yes. All I know is I was Jeebus Crispus.
Yeah.
So you guys were drama nerds?
Kind of. I don't know if
I
we
was
would
too
go
in high
that
school.
Far, but
I think we were just a bunch of just kind of funny people that kind of found themselves together freshman year and needed a group to belong to, and that's what this kind of was for us.
That's a very good way of putting it. I think we, as a group, got more from being a group together than we did. I don't know. I feel like we did make some good contributions and had some good
We got
events.
1 or 2 people to come to the college.
Yeah, right? But it was just a very positive experience for us on the team. So yeah, I'm sure we'll have other little tidbits that come up in our conversation tonight. But the reason we wanted to invite Amanda on is because as we make our shift into spending a lot of our time focusing on the 3 main categories, each week we want to make sure that we're hitting one. So last week we had a conversation with Julian Newman, and much of that was centered around faith. And Julian's background is as a pastor and now a consultant on diversity and things like that. So to kind of get us started, Amanda's actually had the privilege of hearing Julian teach, and she is also involved in some faith and racial reconciliation type of work. So just thought I'd give you the opportunity, and Amanda, to first of all introduce yourself, any more you want to say about who you are, what you do, and then tell us a little bit about the work you're doing with faith and race.
Sure. Well, I'm Amanda Waldron. I am a licensed clinical social worker here in Grand Rapids. I own a practice called Whole Self Counseling, GR. And I feel a little unqualified to talk about race and faith. It's one of those things where I don't think anyone's ever arriving. I think I just happen to, kind of be in the right place on my journey at the right time. Grew up in a pretty homogenous community in central Michigan, very small rural area, and through my own journey, one of our pastor's wives up there kind of saw what I was posting, thoughts on faith and race, and asked if I would want to facilitate something. And I was like, I don't know if I'm qualified to do that.
Right.
I'm willing to do that.
Sure.
And along the way got connected with a co-facilitator, also connected to the area, also connected, knows Pastor Julian.
Yeah, very cool.
We were able to go up on Tuesday and have a conversation with about 30 people, and just kind of gave them a quick primer of why we should care about this, why we should talk about this, why what's going on in the world and how do we frame that through our Christian lens.
Awesome. So, what does that work look like? Is it like a weekly workshop, or what does it look like so far?
Kind of just a one-time thing so
Okay.
far.
That's all right.
Yeah, we'll kind of see what the feedback is. Amy Dobbins, who is the minister's wife up there, was just kind of on her own journey and felt that she wanted some help bringing this information to the congregation. And I think when you grow up in a really white area, there is just the assumption that this isn't work that needs to be done.
Yeah.
Or you just, even my own journey of growing up with that and having a certain lens coming to Grand Rapids when I came here for college, and thus far college on, having to kind of rework and refashion and come to grips with my own socialization around race in America.
Yeah.
And so I think it was really just, we did some defining of terms. We did some connection of what the Bible has to say about race. We did the fastest history lesson of race in America. And then we were able to, take some questions as well. So just kind of an introduction, I think, at this point. So we'll see if there's any further interest in that.
Right. Yeah. One of the things that Julian said last week is when we start these conversations and when we start to engage with people who may not look like us, it's going to be awkward. And he said, sit in that and welcome that awkwardness, but just keep moving forward. And that was such good advice for me. So just a quick story, and then we'll kind of transition into, I guess, the interview portion of our time together. But yesterday I had a interesting privilege of officiating at a wedding for complete strangers. I decided I was going to step out and in my gig work do some officiating at weddings. I was ordained back in my first job out of college. So I guess it's what I do as a side hustle.
Are you going to start a podcast about being an ordained minister?
I could tell a lot of stories.
I bet you could,
man.
Especially at the receptions.
I didn't stay for that.
Well, I mean, eventually you probably will.
Yeah. But anyway, last night, I won't get into the details of the wedding. Suffice it to say, it was literally a hot mess. It was outside. But other than that, when we arrived at the park where the ceremony was, there was a black family that was doing family photos in the same space that that the couple had reserved for their wedding. And looking at the family of the couple I was about to wed, I could kind of just tell from people watching and, watching their interactions that perhaps they were not necessarily well versed in race relations. However, I also noticed and was very encouraged by the fact that the family of the couple getting married, they just allowed the family photo group to finish, and they even, we were supposed to start the wedding at 5, but the bride and groom allowed the African American family to finish up their pictures. And it was just so encouraging to see, that could have gone sideways really fast. I mean, people could have been like, this is our space, you're invading, we have this reserved, what are you doing here? But as I was watching the family getting their pictures taken, just seeing the amount of love they had for each other and the siblings getting along, and the mom just in her element, big smile with all of her kids. It was like, how could you possibly tell them to get lost? So I was encouraged by the fact that the two parties got along, and I took Julian's advice and I went up to the family and I just said to the mom, you have a beautiful family. And I felt like, oh, what did I just do? It was super awkward. I mean...
That's very awkward for you.
Yeah.
Because you're an introvert.
I would rather just kind of do my thing, officiate, and get in my car and leave. But no, I went up to this random family and complimented them. And the mom just looks at me and she's like, if it weren't for COVID, I would give you a hug. And I was just like, aw. She said, seriously, thank you so much. And I was like, of course. And she's like, I sure have a lot of them. And she looks at her kids, and it was just a really positive interaction. So I'm thinking in my head, she was probably thinking I was coming over to tell them to get lost. And when I didn't say that, I think that probably meant something to her. So yeah, I hear you on the awkward piece, not feeling qualified, and yet stepping into it. It is quite a journey.
Yeah, because I think if you can lead with your own vulnerability and have enough capacity to maybe suppress your own ego of what's going on and what's coming up for you, because we're all processing this to some degree, right? We're all challenging some assumptions that we have and may still have, but I think, yeah, if you're willing to enter into that and have a spirit of like, okay, I'm going to mess this up, and hopefully I will learn from someone telling me when I'm doing that, yeah, like we just have to start having these conversations.
Well, I'm encouraged that you had the reaction that happened, you know, especially with how sensitive everything is right now with race and stuff. You just wonder if that could have gone poorly.
Yeah, I was almost sitting there expecting it to go poorly. Yeah. And it didn't.
Well, that's really great. Good. So, Amanda, let's start kind of from the beginning. I'm more excited to have a therapist on.
Yeah.
Just because, like...
What can I help you guys with?
You're right. Like, and I've been missing mine. She's been on maternity leave for like 2.5 months. So I've been jonesing a little bit, but it's just always cool to have a professional on. You know, we've had a pastor on, and like, I'd love to get my pastor on and those things. So why don't you tell us how you got into this kind of work and why your passion is to help people?
Yeah. Well, I think back at Cornerstone, I came in undeclared and was trying to figure out what that meant and what I wanted to do. And I remember thinking, like, I'm really just interested in why people do what they do. And so ended up pursuing a major in psychology. It wasn't till my senior year that I kind of found out what social work was, and had I known that, I probably would have gone the social work track, but it was senior year, and so I'm like, well, I'm just gonna get my degrry. And then
what did your parents think about that, going into school, like an expensive school, like without a plan?
I don't know. I think I might have originally thought maybe education, so maybe there was this idea of a plan.
Sure.
Okay.
And I was financing it, so they were probably like, do whatever you want.
I should have asked that. I just assumed that, you know, parents help out. So
no, student loans.
No, there's nothing wrong. I mean, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, so got out of school and was like, well, maybe I can do what I want to do with this psychology degree.
Sure.
And over the course of 5 or 6 years, figured out that I couldn't. And so actually the help with one of my therapists in my mid-20s, they warned me about the sound not hitting the table, and I just did. I kind of figured out that I wanted to work more with people. And so then I ended up going back to school and getting my master's in social work.
Okay. Where did you go for that?
Western, here in Grand Rapids.
Yeah, that's where my wife went too.
Campus.
Very cool.
It was a great program because you could work during the day and then take classes at night. So,
perfect.
Ended up getting my degree, which social work degree is super versatile.
Yeah.
And have worked in a couple different agencies around town, and then last fall decided that I was going to maybe try and look into doing my own private practice, and launched in January, and then went full-time the first week of March.
Wow, that's really quick.
2 weeks before the shutdown.
Oh, man.
So it's been interesting. It's been good.
Good.
But yeah, that's kind of how I...
So how does that work? My sister has her master's. Do you have your master's or PhD?
My master's.
Okay, in social work. But she has to work under somebody.
Yeah.
How does that work with you? Because it looks like you don't.
Yeah. So the first... you have to, I can't remember, it's 2,000, 4,000. It basically equates to 2 years of full-time work underneath a supervisor.
Oh.
So, you go to school and you learn all this stuff, but you're still practicing. Like, I'm still practicing social work.
Yeah, for sure.
At this stage in the game too of, you go, and then now you're face to face with people and anything can happen. Uncomfortable conversations happen. And so it's nice to be able to have a supervisor you can lean on. And even now still, I have friends that are in the profession that I will go and consult if I'm like, what do I do with this?
Right.
Or how do I proceed with this?
So you basically get the 2,000 hours. Is that what it is? And then you can go on your own?
Then you're fully licensed and yeah, you can.
Oh, okay. That's cool. I didn't know that.
Yep.
She's in California. I don't know if it's different over there, but
yeah. So each state is actually different in how they do their licensure. So
yeah, for sure. So what have you done with COVID? Like, I mean, have you, has it just dropped off? Or you just been doing telehealth or? Yeah,
it was kind of this mad scramble that most therapists, that I knew were not doing telehealth at that time. And even I had considered it, but I was like, I think the face-to-face is just more personal. But then when you're kind of in a situation where you don't really have a choice, you learn it pretty fast. So
no kidding.
I had a few people drop off because they weren't sure if that was for them, but have had the people that I've brought on have been understanding of like, this is just kind of the way that medicine is right now.
Yeah.
So and you can basically do anything over telehealth that you would do face to face.
Yeah, with a secure encrypted or whatever.
Yep.
You know, one of our sponsors is BetterHelp, and that's obviously all telehealth. And while we're pro for it, but pro for getting any kind of therapy you can, I honestly feel the face-to-face is obviously better, and the telehealth can be a little weird, depending on the person's setup. You know, like even when we have an interview and we're doing it like digitally, with not in the studio, like the camera's right here, but you also, how do you look at the person and look at the camera at the same time? Like I feel like they need to make a monitor that has a camera built like right in the middle. And then when you're not using it, like the screen part comes up or something. Like I don't know. It's just weird. But I think it's great for people, especially that live in areas that don't have therapists, you know. It works well. How have you felt with it? Has it been awkward for you, or has it been okay?
It's been fine. And I think I feel pretty comfortable on it. I mean, you've always got technology issues that are really stressful. So like I did an assessment or an initial meeting last week and our voices and like faces weren't matching up, which is important when you're a therapist to like express attunement to your client. And you're like, okay, well, hopefully they can hear it in my voice if they can't see it in my face in real time.
I know Ben struggled with his guy a little bit. And then my daughter sees a therapist and they've had horrible internet issues. Like, I don't know if they don't have very good internet at the place that they go in Granville, but she's like, this is stupid. Because it gets cut off. So you start, and then you don't know how long you've been talking before, and they're like, oh, by the way, I haven't heard you for the last 5 minutes. And you're just like, all right, this is dumb. Let's just punt.
I haven't had too many problems like that where the sound's completely gone off.
Good. So do you do the telehealth from your home, or do you do it from the office?
I do it from my home.
Okay.
I've got a setup in my bedroom.
Nice.
The background is like my wall in my closet door. So.
Yeah. Whenever we do like a remote recording and I'm doing it from my house, my current setup is this closet in our office that's just full of random stuff, and there's no door. So I always try to put up a green screen or something. But it's interesting, all the things we've had to adjust and make room for in light of COVID. So, well, shifting gears a little bit, something that I'm curious about, you know, after going to college with you and having Breakpoint in common and just, you know, getting to see you and get to know you during that phase. At what point did it become like super clear to you that social work, all of that is what it is? Was it the senior year, or when did you kind of have that defining moment?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it was probably junior, senior year. I started going to a church that was a little bit more globally minded and a little bit more social justice minded. And I think
that City Life?
No, it was Mars Hill at the time. Is where I was going.
Okay.
And I think just having a church that started talking about that kind of stuff.
Right.
I think I also became aware of some social issues that I really connected with at the time. And so just through kind of my own research, recognized that social work was probably something I should have connected with earlier. But yeah, I think I've always had a little bit of a bent toward justice. My mom tells a story of when I was in the nursery when I was younger, and justice around toy distribution. And so I think it's just always been kind of this leaning that I've had toward.
Yeah.
So are you like a type A personality then? Like driven and I mean, because I kind of feel like I have that high justice level too, and my daughter does too, and we're both kind of can be a handful.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yeah.
I think I might be. I don't really think of myself like that, but my behavior might say otherwise.
Yeah, because I mean, as a therapist, it would be weird to be super type A. That's just from a layman perspective. I would think that wouldn't be beneficial in a like trying to help people.
Yeah,
situation,
I mean, in some sense, you've got like the business side of running.
Which is great.
Practice, which is where you need that kind of drivenness and.
Yeah.
So maybe what's type B?
I don't know. I always just say type A because that's what I am.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Nice. So you mentioned your mom as maybe someone who's picked up on that bent towards social work. Who are the other influences in your life that have kind of helped lead you to where you are?
Oh, man. That's a good question. I mean, I've really lucked out with good friendships around people that care about stuff. And so I think even Ben mentioned City Life, which is the church that we attend now, I think has been a major player in that as well. So you've got kind of that coupling of like faith and justice and talking about larger social issues in the context of faith. And so I think that's been really influential. And then just, friendships that have come out of that church of people that are doing, work around immigration and foster care and housing. So, my relationships within that church have been huge.
Yeah, that's awesome.
How long have you gone to that church?
11 years.
Oh, wow.
I think.
So it's been around for a while.
To check with my friend Miranda, because her and I started at the same time. So I always am like, Miranda, how long have we been going here?
I think Miranda knows my wife, Andy.
Okay.
Is she the one that leads the youth group?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yes, they were foster parents or something maybe at one point.
Okay.
I don't remember. But yeah, Miranda. That's another person that was in our circle that's like, you guys should check out City Life.
Yeah.
So there were so many people. It's just crazy how that works. Let's see. There's so many questions because honestly, I'm just, you go to college and you have those instrumental 4 years and then people obviously graduate or move on and go their separate ways. And then I just love it when randomly the opportunities to connect present themselves. So there's a pretty big gap between when we were in regular communication. We talked about how you've also done your share of gig work and that sort of thing. I guess the direction I'm going is post-college. I know for me, there were things I had to come to terms with that perhaps this is what I learned or was under at Cornerstone, but now I'm in the real world, whatever that looks like for our context. There were some things that I kind of had to question or let go of. I'm thinking of, I would say some of the professors at Cornerstone had very differing views on women in ministry, for example. Were there any, I guess, issues like that you had to wrestle with after your time at Cornerstone where perhaps your faith moved you to grow beyond Cornerstone?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I don't think it cannot do that. But I would say women in ministry would be one for me as well. And I kind of fought that for a time because that's not the tradition that I grew up in. And I even remember having conversations at Cornerstone around that topic. But yeah, probably around 25, I had a pretty big faith crisis where I'm like, I don't know if I can do this anymore.
Yeah.
This doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
And had to kind of like strip everything down to the foundation of like, so I grew up in the church, and my foundation and my worldview, my lens was pretty well set. And so I kind of stripped it down to the foundation and realized like, okay, I don't think I can not be a Christian, but how do I function with where I'm at right now?
Yes.
And actually went back and took some systematic theology classes at Grand Rapids Theological Seminary.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, because
wow.
I needed some sort of like framework, and I was like, well, I like academics, and I like I'm pretty emotional, and I probably need something a little bit logical right now. So I went back and I audited those 3 classes because I needed help kind of pulling that apart, which is actually because that intertwines with my own kind of counseling journey as well. And through both of those experiences, realized or recognized that I had a pretty black and white way of thinking about both faith, relationships. Like most of my world had to be black and white. And when it wasn't, it created a lot of stress. And so both through counseling and through these seminary classes, was given permission to kind of live in that gray of like, okay, here's your boundaries, but anything in here is okay to land in.
Yes. That's a really good way of putting it. Would you agree that perhaps Cornerstone felt like it was a very black and white environment?
I think that's hard to tell. Maybe in retrospect, I think probably at the time I'm like, this is great. I need black and white.
Well, clearly you're type A. You're type A because you're talking about black and white. Like you've already said 2 ding dings. And I'm like,
all right.
Checking the boxes.
You heard it here first.
Yeah. I ask that because I too kind of had a crisis of faith after Cornerstone, and mine took a while. It was building. My wife has always been very social justice minded, and we got into foster care and adoption, and we really felt strongly that was God's pull and leading in our life. And then the rug was totally swept out from underneath us. We were not able to adopt the kids that we were caring for, even after being told that we were. The courts had signed off on everything, but then the Oregon Supreme Court ruled against us, ruled against the child welfare system, and ruled in favor of the birth parents. And that hardly ever happens.
Yeah.
And that was crushing. And so I too had one of those moments where it's like, do I really believe
that God is good? Yep.
Exactly. You took the words out of my mouth. And I really had to wrestle with the fact that, yes, God is good, but God's goodness does not mean that everything's going to be peachy, that there's not going to be struggle, that there's not going to be pain. And that was a pretty big wake-up call for me, coming to grips with the fact that my faith and my journey through life is not black and white, and it is not simple by any means. It's messy and rocky. And I guess I'm curious if others who attend Christian universities experience that. Maybe it's just part of growing up and becoming an adult, but I think there's something to be said about being in such a strong Christian atmosphere as Cornerstone and then kind of leaving that bubble after graduating, and things kind of shift and move.
Did you go to private school too, Christian school, growing up?
I went preschool to 8th grade, and then I did high school at a public school, but it was Zealand public. So
it's got to be weird to go to Christian school your whole life and then a Christian college, and you talk about that bubble, and then go out in the world and you're like, okay, I'm ready to tell people about Jesus and go into my job, and then you're like, boom, like real life. So did you experience that, like Ben said, that kind of thing after you got out of college?
I don't remember that specifically. I do think, I think when you are 18 to 22, like you are still coming out of, like, even brain development is like, you are more of that concrete kind of thinker. And so I think it's really, I don't know, that decade of your 20s is really coming to grips with, like, okay, I'm out on my own. What do I actually think about these things? Because I think, when you're in an environment where everybody's like, here's the truth, here's the way to think about this. And I mean, there were professors there that challenged and grew my view of things.
For sure.
But I think, when you're away from that and kind of have to, like, stand on your own faith, you should have a crisis of faith at some point, because I think Christianity, faith is really complex. And so when we boil it down to just it's this or this or this,
right,
we're just setting ourselves up for failure, because rarely is it like that.
Yes, no kidding.
I'm going to shift a little bit into the mental health. What do you think with mental health in the church? So that's always, we've been kind of seeing articles pop up. I feel like when I'm on Twitter and all that stuff, when you start searching for stuff, it kind of like, the algorithms, when you look, because, with Facebook listens to you. So you start talking about cats, and I'm going to get video about kitty litter in about 20 minutes. But so we kind of been talking about mental health in the church, and I feel, and I don't know about Ben, but it's not addressed very much. And what do you feel about that, maybe in your current church life and personally, if you're willing to share that? Yeah.
Well, I think City Life just does a good job about talking about these hard topics, like we've done, or they've done. I haven't been a part of it, but they've talked about mental health in the church. And so sometimes I think my view's a little bit skewed, because I'm like, oh, churches are doing this because my church is doing this.
Right.
But that's probably not the case. I think there is still some of that old verbiage around, like, you just need to pray this away. That this is a spiritual concern.
Oh, that's frustrating.
Which, I mean, part of it can be, but it's also,
but it's still real life.
Yeah, it can be, but that's part of, like, who you are as a person. So, like, like mental health impacts your spiritual self, your physical self, your emotional self. And so just to say, like, here's the one solution of how to manage your mental health is just through prayer. Well, great. Like, that can be one tool, but, like, we're complex human beings.
Right.
Sometimes we need to take medication. Sometimes we need other interventions.
Well, yeah, it's just like the same example as, like, if you broke your arm, would you pray the broken arm to heal, or would you go to the doctor to get it fixed?
Yeah.
But it's just, mental health is such, like, a broad. It's not like a simple break in the arm. You're like, okay, I see this, fix it, done, move on. Life's better.
Right.
But mental health is more of a, like a journey, like everyone says, you know what I mean? But, I the pray away thing, when you said that, I'm just like, oh, that just frustrates me to no end.
Right. Or that we should always be joyful, or never be sad, which isn't even biblical. Like, so we've got tons of examples where the whole range of emotion is used within the Bible.
So you say your church is doing things. Are they having sermons about it, or are they offering, like, workshops or classes, or? Yeah,
we do sermons. There've been some programs in the past around, like, mental health. We connect with Pine Rest as well, so individuals at our church can have some free counseling sessions.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, our church, I can't say that I'm super involved in the comings and goings of the church, but I don't know that they brought up anything about it. I mean, I'm not, like, hating on them, but I mean, I just think it's something that in a lot of these churches, it's not talked about. Even in the, like, I would feel like ours is not like City Life, as far as I would say, what am I trying to say? I don't want to go liberal or conservative, but I mean, I feel they lean a little more liberal than conservative. And our church, I feel like, kind of does too, but we still don't talk about it. So
and I think, like, we've seen over the last couple of years, even a string of high profile pastors and people in ministry coming to the end of their mental health, or end of their lives. There's been an increase in suicide among pastors as well, because I think that there's this idea that
you're the leader,
right?
You can't go get help. You shouldn't
struggle with this, but mental health, just like physical health, is always with us. We're always someplace on like on a spectrum of health with our mental health. And so if we're not addressing that component of ourselves, yeah, I think we're just setting ourselves up for failure, because we're not just spiritual beings, we're emotional and physical beings too.
For
Absolutely.
sure.
Yeah. As we were talking, somebody said cat.
That was me.
That was you. Yeah. Well, I heard that, and then my brain, I'm finding that I don't know if this surprises you, Jason, but Andy and I have been talking about how perhaps I might have some ADD issues. I don't know. So I heard cat, and so my brain just immediately went to a quote that I remember from Anne Lamott. Are you familiar with her work? So you were talking, and it ties in perfectly, so I love how that happens. We were talking about how churches sometimes can be a little left-leaning or right-leaning, whatever the case may be. And Anne Lamott, before she knew Christ, was the type of person who swore up and down she would never be a person of religion, especially Christianity. So I pulled up just a little tidbit that I'll read, and then I'd love to get your thoughts on this too, Amanda, just from your experience. So she says, "I did not mean to be a Christian. I have been very clear about that. My first words upon encountering the presence of Jesus for the first time 12 years ago were, 'I swear to God, I would rather die.' I really would have rather died at that point than to have my wonderful, brilliant, left-wing, non-believer friends know that I had begun to love Jesus. I think they would have been less appalled if I had developed a close personal friendship with Strom Thurman. At least there is some reason to believe that Strom Thurman is a real person." I'm sorry, Sheltered Ben doesn't know who that is.
Storm and Norman?
I think a Supreme Court justice.
I thought he was like a general.
I think he might be a conservative Supreme Court justice.
Thurman. Strom Thurman. That's what it is. I'm going to give points to Amanda. Yes, he served 48 years.
Oh,
that's crazy.
that term limits, yo.
Seriously. So anyway, Strom Thurman, not Storm Thurman. But anyway, Storm and Norman.
I was thinking Storm and Norman is like Norman Schwarzkopf. I think that's who it.
I don't know who that is.
You don't? All right.
I think we both probably grew up pretty sheltered.
Here's the segment of the show where we talk about what we don't know.
Right.
Yeah, we should have one of those, because there's a lot of times that I'll turn to Jason and be like, I don't know what that is. Or my wife. They make fun of me for being sheltered.
Yeah.
But anyway, Strom Thurman. So she said that her friends would have been less appalled if she had developed a close friendship with this super conservative political figure. At least there is some reason to believe that Strom Thurman is a real person, more or less. But I never felt like I had much choice with Jesus. He was relentless. I didn't experience him so much as the Hound of Heaven, as the old description has it, but as the alley cat of heaven, who seemed to believe that if it just keeps showing up, meowing and standing outside your door, you'd eventually open up and give him a bowl of milk. Of course, as soon as you do, you're screwed, and the next thing you know, he's sleeping on your bed every night and stepping on your chest at dawn to play a little push-push. I was tired and vulnerable, and he won. I let him in. This is what I said at the moment of my conversion. I said, "F it. Come in. I quit."
Mm-hmm.
He started sleeping on my bed that night. It was not so bad. It was even pretty nice. He loved me. He didn't shed or need to have his claws trimmed, and he never needed a flea dip. I mean, what a savior, right? Then when I was dozing, tiny kitten that I was, he picked me up like a mother cat by the scruff of my neck and deposited me in a little church across the flea market in Marin's Black Ghetto. That's where I was when I came to, and then I came to believe. So kind of a pretty dramatic conversion story, and I don't know, I hear stories like that, and it gives me hope that beyond all of this left-wing, right-wing politics and racism and everything else, it's just a good reminder to me that behind all of that and above all of that, we serve a God who calls us out and seeks us out and is relentless with us.
Mm-hmm.
So That just came to mind when Jason said cat. So I know I put you on the spot a little bit, but any follow-up comments on that passage or about Anne's story?
Yeah, I think that pursuit, and even within the Christian church right now, I think that pursuit is happening of, when I talk a lot about like the lens through which we see things and in mental health. So like, yeah, how our lens is just formed and how that can increase or decrease our distress with how we're perceiving things. But even, I don't know, in my journey in the last couple months of like making sure that the lens through which I'm seeing things through is my faith lens first and always versus any sort of political lens that I might have.
Sure.
And so even the pursuit of that in this country, I think, I don't know, I've been hearing more and more conversations around that of how are we making sure that we're perceiving events through, that faith lens.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So how does one, let's say maybe a listener's out there and they're thinking, ooh, I've not really been looking through my faith lens.
Mm-hmm.
Or they don't have a faith.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, that's something we talked about with Julian too.
Mm-hmm.
You're really stuck on that thing.
What?
the people who don't have faith.
Well, we can sit there and pat each other on the back about being Christians, but it doesn't mean jack shit. I mean, it does, but if we're not going out to the people that
need it.
Yeah, like if we're sheltering ourselves off and being like, we're faith-based, but we have to talk about the people that don't have faith.
Yeah.
And so how can we go out there? What Julian did answer well, I couldn't remember what he said. I can't remember what I said 10 minutes ago. But who answered really well, how can we, be, what am I trying to say? Like just be good with race and good with faith, but we have to go out and do that.
Yes. Mm-hmm. You have to get awkward. Really.
Yeah, you got to get awkward.
Yeah. Because there are tons of people right now that may not have a faith background or ascribe to any sort of faith that are still living out these ways that us that are in the faith are commanded and taught to do. And so what does it mean when people outside of the work are doing kingdom work?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And we may be lagging behind.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Oh, that's embarrassing.
But there's a lot of, But you were talking, Jason, about how so many of us, we like to pat each other on the back. We spend so much time insulated in our comfortable bubbles. And meanwhile...
Me included, by the way.
Sure,
right.
None of us are.
Like, I'm not throwing a stone or anything.
We're all socialized in the same way.
Right. Very, very true. But then, I just go back to the passage of Scripture where it's a parable that Jesus is giving, and
you need to Google it?
I might.
Man.
So I can just summarize because it's just such a good story. But basically, some religious folk are like, who's the best in heaven? And Jesus goes on to list several key things that are very social justice minded. Feeding, I'm going to Google it because I'm just butchering this. It's in my head, but I
go
can't
ahead
get
and
it
Google
out.
it. Yeah, I'm always impressed when a minister or pastor can I assume he's saying the right thing, but can just spill it out without looking at it.
I've never heard that story.
Yeah. Well, Julian did really well with that. I could notice. But sometimes my pastor, he thinks he knows it, and then it's up on the screen, and he starts talking. I was like, "Oh, you're just a titch off."
Right.
I'm not going to tell him that.
Right.
But.
Yeah. Okay. So it's let's see. He's talking about the sheep and goats. That's the big phrase that came to mind. And so it says, this is Matthew 25, the king will say to those on his right, "Come, you who are blessed by my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the creation of the world. This is the part that always gets me. For I was hungry, and you fed me. I was thirsty, and you gave me a drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me into your home. I was naked, and you gave me clothing. I was sick, and you cared for me. I was in prison, and you visited me." That obviously confused a lot of people who replied, Lord, when did we ever see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink, or a stranger and show you hospitality, or naked and give you clothing? When did we ever see you sick or in prison and visit you?" And the king will say, "I tell you the truth. When you did it to one of the least of these, my brothers and sisters, you are doing it to me." Then the king will turn to those on the left and say, "Away with you, you cursed ones, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his demons." Pretty harsh. "I was hungry and you didn't feed me. I was thirsty and you didn't give me a drink. I was a stranger and you didn't invite me into your home. I was naked and you didn't give me clothing. I was sick and in prison and you didn't visit me." So, pretty harsh words that Jesus uses there. And I think why that stands out to me in this conversation so far is we were just talking about how insulated the church can be and how we like to pat each other on the back. And I think, unfortunately, so much of Christianity has become that, and it's become less of taking care of the least of these. And we've essentially sacrificed that to the rest of the world. So I think you brought up a really good point, Amanda. The fact that, people outside the kingdom are doing this work, which I'm glad and grateful for, but I think we really kind of left a lot that we should have been doing. So kind of a sucker punch.
And similar story in like the story of the Good Samaritan, where the religious leaders of the time did not stop to offer justice, mercy for this individual. And so it was someone outside of kind of who they would consider this in-group stopped to take care of this man. And so, what does that say about, how we may be practicing Christianity? I have other thoughts on that, but they're not developed yet. So I don't think I'm going to say them tonight.
You brought up like looking through the political view, or maybe Ben did, through a faith.
The lenses.
The lenses of faith. But how do you have a conversation with somebody that may be non-Christian that you're trying to look through that? I mean, I guess I don't know if that's a question you can answer. It's just weird. Like if you're like having this discussion with somebody about a political issue and you're using faith and they're not, it's kind of going to be weird, right? Because they're going to be like, well, what does that have to do with this political topic?
Right. Yeah.
Because Jesus said this, big whoop. What if he says that to you? Are you going to be like I'm just asking anyone, not just you in general, but.
Yeah. Well, I think from a therapy perspective, if someone didn't necessarily have a faith background, I wouldn't start there.
Well, of course. but I mean, if you would in the conversation, I guess my question is, would you not bring up, faith in Jesus during that discussion if you knew that person was not faith-based?
I may bring it up, but only in the context of maybe my own experience or what I'm learning story. Or talking from my perspective of like, this is what I'm learning, or this is how I've had to expand my lens when it's come to this. Yeah.
It's always a weird, like, is that an opportunity to witness, or not? Like, and you're talking about like heavy stuff. It's almost, I feel like that's a terrible time personally to witness, but that's just me.
I think there's a lot to be said in that setting for your actions and your compassion and everything but your words, allowing those to speak for your faith. That goes a long way. I believe strongly that it does. So before Jason gave pushback with his, what about people outside of the faith? One question I was trying to put into words for Amanda was, how do you go, or maybe you can speak from personal experience or whatever the case may be, but how does one go from seeing the world through the political lens or fill in the blank lens? What does it take to shed that lens and put on the lens of faith in order to see the world more accurately?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I can only speak from my perspective. So growing up in a rural upper Michigan community, I grew up with the idea that like we were Republicans. That's what we did.
Yeah.
And I think it was coming to Cornerstone and having a roommate that didn't vote Republican
Oh.
that was like, hey, wait
How
a minute.
dare you?
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
Where I think, again, it was that black and white thinking of like, of course you vote Republican. And so I think just having a little bit of discrepancy of like, oh, wait, I didn't know there was an option.
Right.
And so, I mean, this has been my journey too, right? So as I've kind of become a little bit more socially minded, or kind of the things that my heart is pulled to, it's been more within a certain political rhetoric.
Sure.
And so I think just even in the last couple days, recognizing, I don't know, just bringing in some critical thinking of like, okay, so wait a minute, who's passing policies, who is doing political work that kind of lines up with this, what are other factors going on behind this, but also I think if we're saying that to be a Christian is to be in this political party,
That's weird.
that we are as Christians, we believe that there's a certain amount of sin in this world.
Yeah.
That sin affects us, and not only us, but our systems, our places that we work, the way that this country operates, that there's a certain level of sin at every level. And so for us to say like they hold like that American Christianity is linked to this political party.
Oh, don't even start with that.
Because I will never stop.
Becomes really detrimental to our faith then, right?
Yeah.
So now we're operating according to the lines and the dogma, the testament of this political party, versus being able to step back and be critical of like, okay, I am a Christian first and foremost. I'm a Christian that lives in America. How do I separate myself from being an American Christian to being a Christian that has brothers and sisters all over the world? So like Christianity isn't just American, but I think there's a certain brand of American Christianity that is permeable in our country. But what does Christianity look like separate from like how do we join with maybe the worldwide idea of Christianity versus just what Christianity looks like in the United States?
That's really good. You have any follow-up on that?
You guys want to do your own episode?
No,
I mean,
I wanted to hear your take because I know sometimes we don't necessarily.
Yeah, I do agree with that. What I wanted to take away is like I feel like it's weird. Like you're Republican, you have to go to church, right? Like does Donald Trump go to church? I highly doubt it. You know what I mean? And it's just this weird thing that when it started out, like back when these parties, and I don't even know, I'm terrible at that kind of stuff, but like when they were formed, like why is it the right were God-fearing people, and why is the left, they were like just hoodlums?
Right.
It's just this weird thing. So I don't know how you break that weirdness of the right is, we're all faith-based and the left isn't, because it's kind of disrespectful if you think about it, because I'm kind of a moderate. I was really right, but now I'm in the middle, and I'm faith-based. I'm a little bit of a hoodlum, but
Well, here's part of my story. Little sheltered Ben, who, like, anytime my wife brings up cultural references from the 80s or 90s, they're completely lost on me. Like,
that's unfortunate.
I don't have any frame of reference. My entire music collection was all like Christian
DC talk.
Yes. And the books that I would read were like The Left Behind and, any Frank Peretti, stuff. And I was a proud wearer of the WWJD bracelet. Like that was my entire life as a child, young adult, teenager. I went to Cornerstone and things definitely started shifting and my horizons were expanding. And then for whatever reason, I'm still not sure how I ended up doing it. It was a whim. I read about this place called Center for Student Missions, and they were looking for people to lead mission trips in urban settings in America. So I was like, cool, I want to do that. So I signed up, and they placed me in, of all places, Los Angeles, California. I lived in South Central LA for that summer. I was the minority. I was in way over my head. I was overwhelmed. I remember calling my mentor almost on a daily basis when I first got there. And it was just like, Dave, I need some help. Like, I don't know how to handle this. I don't know. Did you ever have Dave Beach as a professor?
Nope.
No, such a great guy, but he was my go-to. But yeah, I remember being in a church service and the pastor was black and somehow started talking politics and somehow mentioned voting Democrat. And it was like this sting in my soul. It was like, wait, that's a thing? Like you can vote Democrat and be a Christian? And it's just shows how narrow and black and white really my life had been up to that point. And so for me, that was a very life altering experience. So yeah. So I guess where I'm going with all of that, what does it take to realize, I mean, do you think it's possible to take off that lens and put on the faith lens without a crisis of faith? Or do you think that it takes a crisis? And I'd love to hear both of your feedback on that.
Yeah, I think you can. And I don't know if I think it can take a crisis of faith, but I think it can also take some experience like that where you start to get other information or another piece of the story or a possibility. There's a great worksheet online. If anyone wants to look it up, it's called Unhelpful Thinking Styles.
Huh.
I do this with most of my clients, but it's kind of these 10 most common ways that we may not be taking in the full picture of what's going on. So there's things on there like black and white thinking or generalization, or jumping to conclusion, or like mental filter is kind of the same thing as kind of mental lens. So this worksheet's really trying to give a name and language to maybe some things. Because I think, again, if we're not having conversations, if we're not naming some of this stuff, it's really hard to talk about it and really hard to kind of recognize it's going on. It's like happening back here.
Yeah.
And I know this from my own counseling experience of like, once I started having language around that, I was like, oh, okay, I can speak to this. I can do something about it.
Really
but I
good.
think sometimes when we're not having conversations about mental health, or we're not having conversations around race, we just assume that the way we're seeing things is accurate.
Right.
But nobody sees this world 100% accurate all the time. And we may be prone to some of these unhelpful thinking styles. Like I know which ones I'm more prone to. So those are usually the ones that I have to push back against, or where my automatic thinking comes in. And so I think if people really kind of want to start examining like, okay, what lens am I viewing this through? It's, I guess, first having like thinking that question and starting to maybe pull apart like, oh, okay, so maybe in my mind, this one political party was doing everything right, but wait a minute, like they're not. And maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Listen to any talk radio after reading this, and you can start naming like, oh, that's a generalization. that's a catastrophizing.
Yeah.
And so I think, again, these are really easy to slip into. But I think once you start recognizing that they're out there and that there could possibly be other ways of viewing this, you can start to kind of stretch yourself.
Well, I think a lot of times that happen, especially like when you grow up, like you said, you grew up north. I don't know. Did you say where?
Vesterberg, Michigan. Oh. Everyone,
no.
Check out the Farmer in the Dell, best ice cream in northern Michigan.
Can't say I've been there.
Can't say I ever heard of it, either your city or the ice cream. But you grow up a certain way, and I did too. Like it's Republican, but as I've grown older, you just, like you said, you start challenging things and questioning things, and you're like, this is not right. And I'm just glad that we have the freedom to be able to do that, whether you go either way. I can't respond to your question. I don't know what it originally was, but that's just what popped in my head.
No,
that you can change your mind, y'all. Like if even next week, I mean, if someone calls you a flip-flopper, that's crap. Because like you'd be like, all right, I've looked into this a little bit more, and I've changed my mind. I don't think I'm for this anymore. Well, And they're like, well,
then you weren't being truthful in the beginning, but yeah.
yeah. I mean, it's just, yeah. I could go on and on about that kind of stuff, but
and normalizing growth and learning, and that works.
It's super important, and it's okay if you decide, it doesn't even have to be. Well, you can even challenge faith. I mean, you said you had a crisis around, and I don't know if you brought it up, but like it happens. I have my journey through faith too. It kind of ebbs and flows, and ask Ben. I mean, we've had tons of conversations about challenging. Ben and I always say, like, I see God in everything, and I'm like, do you see God in that lamp right there? Do you see, just stuff like that?
Right.
It's the light of the world.
Yeah,
Right.
well, I shouldn't use light. I set you up for that
Yeah.
one, but it just, for everyone listening, it's okay to change, your mind about anything.
And change your lens.
And change your lens. Thank you. Change your thread.
Change your clothes.
All of the above.
Well, Amanda, this has been fun. We've kind of bounced all over the place. Like Ben, first said he wanted to talk about race, and I'm just like, I don't know. We just kind of talked about race, so then
I just wanted to bring it up as a sub point because Amanda was doing that work. So it's a good starting point.
Yeah.
Right.
Take that vulnerable chance and have a conversation. I mean, do your own work.
Right.
But
Don't just trust what everyone else says. So why don't you just tell us about your counseling service a little bit and how people can get a hold of you, and maybe just touch on a few things. I saw you do EMDR, and I'm with my therapist. Ben's like laughing because I keep saying I'm going to do it, and I'm kind of afraid because I'm a control freak, right?
Oh.
So
Type A.
Okay.
So that's tough to do. But why don't you touch on your what you do, and as far as like your services, and just kind of a little ad for you,
Go for it.
Yeah. So my private practice is Whole Self Counseling GR. You can find me at wholeselfgr.com. And I've got a list of kind of what I specialize in. So mainly work with individuals with anxiety, depression, burnout. So that can be school, work, spiritual burnout, codependency, boundaries, and then distressing life events. So that can be big T traumas that everybody would kind of recognize as trauma, or little T traumas, which are kind of just specific to each of us, that all of us have gone through distressing life events.
So you brought up faith. You actually promote, like, that's something that you will do, because a lot of people like may be a Christian, but they're not going to work through spirit stuff in a session. So I just want to clarify.
Sure.
that.
Yes. So I mean, I can bring that to the session, but I work with all types of people, and some people might not even know that about me yet, as working with me as their therapist. And so I'm going to honor whatever you want brought into the session. But some people look for that, and so I want them to be able to find somebody that that has that.
I just wanted to clarify, because I don't know. I feel like my therapist, I know she's a Christian, but it's not like, I don't know if she would dive into like a spiritual discussion.
Yeah. I mean, I think I wanted people to know that, because when I look for a therapist myself, I want somebody that kind of knows the lingo of what I'm talking about. So again, it's not something, I don't even think it's on my front page. If you do enough digging,
I was looking and I didn't. Oh, it says Christian and spiritual counseling.
Yeah.
So if you go under services and fees, you can see it. So that's maybe that's
cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again. This was fun. I always love just kind of having these kind of discussions. Not really any point or anything like that. So thanks for joining us. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, I appreciate it. All right, guys. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we'll see you on the flip side.